don't know about you, but I was enjoying that. I was hoping Jerry would just keep going. Except I want to preach. Now, when it comes to religion, what is the latest fad? Well, we're going to look at the God question this morning, and I'm going to attempt, in case you get distracted by all the other stuff I say, I'm going to attempt to prove there's a God. Now, I'm going to do it without using the Bible. You say, but aren't you committed to the Bible? If you're here for the first time, the people here know that I believe the Bible is the foundation. However, we're going to see that when we deal with people that don't believe there's a God, quoting verses is not going to make a difference in them. And so we're going to look at how do we prove there's a God without using your Bible. It's going to take 2 weeks to do this. Now, there are all kinds of crazy things that go on in religion around the world. One fad that has seeped over from England has been the birth of atheist megachurches, where the atheists want their own churches. You say, what's this all about? Well, there are churches that have now come to America, large churches, where they're packed with people, they have rousing music, they have an inspirational talk, they have offerings, they have everything that we have, but they're lacking one main thing. They don't believe there's a God. They have church without God. Now, I'm going to show you that. Here's the first church of non-belief. And if you look at that, it says deicide services, Friday nights, blasphemy and cocktails. Now, you say, is that happening? Well, it's in Los Angeles. A few weeks ago, one gave birth in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. There's now one down in San Diego. You say, what's deicide? Think homicide, suicide, murder of other people, murder of self. Deicide, dia means God, murder or killing God. Blasphemy and cocktails. You say, really? Has it got, what do the services look like? Well, I was reading about some of these things. They have hundreds of atheists and atheist curious packed into an auditorium. They have live music, moments of reflection, an inspirational talk, a stand-up comic, and then they start getting into the song service. Instead of singing Our God, most of their service, here are a couple of songs they sing. Lean on me, lean on me. And the me is not God. It's somebody saying, lean on me when you are down. And also, here comes the Son, not the Son of God, the S-U-N. Here comes the Son, an old rock song. Now, when I look at this, you say, how did you get to this? We have been dealing with culture wars. There is a culture war going on in America. And we talked about some of it last week, and I concluded with verse 5. We started with verse 1, where it says in 2 Timothy 3, there will be terrible times in the last days. We determined we are in the last days, maybe the last hours. And the times are terrible, and it started listing all of these. And in verse 5, it concluded by saying, having a form of godlessness, but denying its power. And we said that means a lot of things. It means not having the power to save, not having this, but it all melts down to the fact that they have a form of godliness, but no God. That's what it means. It's a religion where the only thing missing is God. Now, part of the culture wars raging in America. Today, the battle over the existence of God. The first question every person has to answer, and the answer to this question will determine all of your philosophy in life, is there a God? Is there really a God? Now, our kids, I was on a university campus. It's a Christian one. But as the board gathered, we started looking at the culture wars that our young people deal with. And the statement was made, the most important segments of time in shaping a child are between 1 and 5 and between 18 and 22. Yeah. Foundation in 1 and 5, but 18 and 22, life decisions are made. And there is increasing pressure on all of our young people, especially as they go out of the home, out of their home churches. The pressure is on to question whether there really is a God. You have the students on the campuses, but you also have people in church pews that have heard preaching, but has never really come to conclusion as to whether or not they believe there really is a God that you are going to be accountable to when you die. And so what I want to do in these culture wars, if there is going to be a form of godliness and God is lacking, I want to hammer home the fact I believe there is a God. And I believe it from the Bible, but if I were to take the Bible off the table, which I will this morning, can I prove there's a God? And I'm going to try to do that. Ben Stein, who is a ticked-off Jew, made a movie entitled Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. And he went into the frightening details about how scientists who believe there is a God who created this stuff are being blackballed within their industry. And at universities where they lose tenure or they get taken off a tenure track because they happen to believe that there is a God who created everything. It says this, welcome to the last days. And here's what it says, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. Now, last week we talked about the without natural affection. And it was interesting, while I was there, we've been preparing a paper for the university on homosexuality. You know, what is the university's stand? And once we get it approved, I'll release it to you. It's very carefully crafted. And it's something that churches and Christian schools are going to have to deal with. They're going to. And it will be a very volatile issue. We talked about that last week. If you weren't here, we should have some CDs back there where you can pick it up, or you can pick it up online. The second one is abortion. And we as a church, we need to be a church that takes a stand for the life of the unborn. I'm all in on that. I believe in the sacredness of human life. And what's interesting is our position on those. You heard it from the governor of the state of New York, the second largest state in the Union, that those ultra-conservatives, extreme conservatives, who believe in pro-life and only traditional marriage are no longer welcome in the state. Now, he's backtracked a little bit. Everybody backtracks after they express their true feelings. And he referred to them, or we have been referred to as bigoted, because we believe in the sanctity of human life and the sacredness of marriage between a man and woman, which all the religions of the world happen to believe, by the way. Well, let's dig into this. Now the question of God. Can I prove there is a God? Now, when we do that, Christians are quick to pull out their Bible and start quoting. And by the way, you should. How does the Bible start? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so throughout the Bible teaches there is a God. It starts with God and it concludes with God's eternal kingdom. Very easy to prove it. I can go to John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things were made by the Word. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst men. And you see this great story of redemption. The Bible is just filled with it. I can go to Romans chapter 1, verse 2, and it says this, or verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So I believe there are clues out there to God all around us. Now, the current challenge. We were able to send a young couple from our church in Michigan to England. And they, just a great young couple, to deal with teenagers. And I remember as they started reporting the condition of the young people in England. He said they don't believe there is a God. And he gave some extraordinary number. He said like 5% of their teenagers believe there is a God. You say, is it that bad? Unless things change, that's us in a decade. And so the issue is just a current challenge that must be addressed. And within higher education, there is the presumption that God is not part of all of this. Abraham Lincoln said, the philosophy in the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy in the government in the next. And we are moving there. Now, if you say there is no God, and by the way, there are only two choices on this, and every person has to make a choice. There is, what are the two choices? There either is a God or there is not a God. You say, is there an option C? There is no option C. There either is a God or there isn't a God. Now, if there isn't a God, here's what happens. There's no life after death. I mean, if we are nothing more than natural material, then there's no life after death. There is no spiritual part. The second part is you don't have a soul. I mean, if everything is natural and physical, there's no supernatural, then this thing that we call a soul will not move to the next place because there is no next place. You say, well, then what would they say your soul is? I'd ask you to make a fist and look at it. Some fists are bigger than others. And what you would call a soul is nothing more than a fist-sized piece of meat inside your skull. We call it a brain. And it's just a very complex supercomputer made of meat that is making you think all of these things, if there is no God. Third thing, you are merely the highest form of animal. We're on the top of the food chain. Thank goodness for that, at least. If there is no God, we are not special. We were not created in the image of God because there is no God. We are just a little bit smarter than the other animals. And then anything is on the table. Anything. The fourth one, human life is not sacred. How could it be if there is no divine one? Therefore, abortion, do whatever you need to do to regulate the population and for your convenience. Euthanasia, put us away when we get old. Save some Social Security money, whatever. If there is no God. If there is no God, then enjoy yourself now because, my friends, that's all you get. And when your last breath is breathed, you're done. Now, there are only two options. If there is no God, I think you agree, those are all truisms, aren't they? But if there is a God, okay, there is no life after death. Or pardon me, if there is a God, there is life after death. Pardon me. And each one of us is going to have to question, what happens when I die? You see, the questions, is there a God and what happens when I'm dead? The second thing is, it's not your body that's the real you. It's this soul that is inside us. And what's interesting is people try to prove that certain things exist, but everybody has a soul. You have a soul. While I'm preaching, your mind is going a mile a minute. And you're thinking through things that none of us can see. And so every one of us admits there's something going on here. It doesn't sound like a fist-sized piece of meat, like a giant supercomputer in your head. There's something going on. And that soul will last forever. But the question is where? Thirdly, there is a code of right and wrong. If there is a God, and He has revealed Himself to us, then the Bible tells us how to do it. Now, there are three. I used to teach philosophy at National University, graduate level, and there were three things: metaphysical, epistemological, and then axiology. And metaphysics says, it basically is there a God? Epistemology is, how do we know what He wants from us? And then axiology is, therefore, how do we live? And so, if there's a right or wrong code, did He reveal it to us in the Bible? Again, the next one is, human life is therefore sacred, and we will be judged for the Holocaust that is going on in America today. One more thing, heaven or hell are the ultimate realities that await each and every one of us. And so if you believe there is no God, and you happen to have chosen the wrong one, which I believe you have, then you face a hell that God said will last forever. Stakes are high. All right, so sum it up. Two big questions, the most important questions that every person must answer. Number one, is there a God? I'm going to try to prove that. And then secondly, what will happen to me the moment I die? And each one of us has to think through that. Now, my purpose today is to show that logic and science and common sense demand that there must be some form of intelligent design, a designer. So let's dig into it. It says God left clues. In Romans it says he's in this universe. If you stare into the starry sky, you can sense him. The Holy Spirit just compels us to believe that this is true. My goal is to bolster the faith of the believer who's had nagging doubts about the existence of God. Some of you came in and in your personal moments, you really wonder whether there's really a God. I hope I can help you feel a little stronger about this on the way out. Number two, to show our students. I am concerned about our kids going off to universities and me not preparing them properly with not just things that apply to their lives, but the deep foundational issues in the Bible. In a few weeks, when I get done with this, we're going to look at universal salvation, and then we're going to look at the question that will not go away. And that question is why? Why does God allow suffering in this world? And we need to address those head on. A third thing is to ignite a spirit of discovery in some of you, where you've just never really thought this through. I hope I light a fire under you. And one more, present the other side of the argument to those people who do not believe there's a God. Now, is it possible to prove there's a God? In a court of law, how do we do this? It's almost scientifically impossible to prove most things in a court of law. And so you have the prosecution and the defense present their cases, and the one that has the preponderance of evidence wins. Let me say, I believe that I cannot scientifically prove there's a God. But I can show enough evidence, the preponderance of evidence would make any wise jury say, there's got to be a God. And I'm going to do it without using the Bible. One of the most outspoken of all of the atheists is Richard Dawkins. And Richard Dawkins wrote a book entitled The God Delusion. And he is one of the neo-atheists, this new round of atheists that are out there. And he made this comment. He said, based on the preponderance of evidence, he is 97 to 99% certain that he is right and there is no God. Okay? You look at that and that says, well, that's pretty good. Except I can give you scholars that say they're almost 100% certain there is a God. And the other question we will look at eventually is, what if he is wrong? If there's a 3% chance there is a God, what are the results of that for him? And we'll talk about that. All right, 8 questions atheists and agnostics need to deal with. I'm going to give you 3 of them this morning. And these will be on my notes. We'll have them posted on the website. I'm going to give you a lot of quotes. I'm going to quote primarily atheist. Okay? I'm going to quote the atheist. Next week, most of my quoting will be from Charles Darwin. I'm going to talk about, from his book, I'll have his book with me, on the problems he had with his own theory. And we'll dabble with those. So don't go out and say Rick's into atheism and doesn't use the Bible. You know me better than that. Let me just from their mouths see what we have. All right, so the first question. What caused the Big Bang? I have 2 incomprehensible challenges that I can't get my mind around. Number 1, the expanding universe. The expanding universe. It's interesting when you look at how large the universe is. I saw a video recently called Indescribable. I wanted to show it in church. I still may. About the hundreds of trillions of light years away that we now see. And that I am told, and every scientist, it is now what they consider settled science, that the universe is expanding out. I look at that, I think through this, and I say, expanding into what? I mean, what? It's into empty space? Well, that's still stuff. And my mind, because I have a finite mind, I cannot grasp the magnitude of this. Recently, this last week, we got a photo back from Mars. I don't know if you saw it. A photo of the Earth from Mars. It's hard to see because it's almost unseeable. I mean, that's how small we are. I can't grasp that, but I believe it. I also have trouble with eternity past. Now, I can see eternity future. That I can comprehend. But I cannot comprehend how God has always existed. I can't deal with that. I struggle with how the universe has always existed. Until the 20th century, scientists didn't believe the universe had a beginning. They said it always existed. Now, how that happens, I can't remedy it in my mind. Until the 20th century, they didn't believe it. But the theologians believed that there was a starting point for our creation. Now scientists almost universally believe that the universe began in one instant, in one place. It's called the Big Bang. You would hear preachers that were ripping on the Big Bang and saying, well, no, God created what? I looked at the Big Bang and I said, I've never seen a greater evidence for the existence of God. Because here, we call it the Big Bang, when everything, including time and matter, the scientists will tell you, the non-believing scientists, that in one instant, time itself and matter were created out of this super particle or something that exploded, and here we are. And then the Hubble telescope came along, and we saw that it's expanding. Now, if it keeps getting wider, what does that mean? Well, it backed up the Big Bang. It meant it started in one spot, and it's just getting bigger. And so even guys like Stephen Hawking, who didn't believe it originally, made this statement. Let's see what Stephen Hawking had. Now, he is in the news quite a bit now, and you remember him. He's the guy in the chair, and he said almost everyone, didn't always believe this, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Certainly not speaking as a theologian or as a believer. Out of nothing came everything. Now, Thomas Aquinas, he was a great theologian, and he had something called the cosmological argument for the existence. He had 5 arguments from philosophy, and one was cosmological argument for the existence of God. Now, that scares you, doesn't it? What does cosmological mean? Let me sum it up. For every cause, there is an effect. For every effect, there is a cause. If something happened, something caused it. And so what he did is he said everything had to have a first cause. Now, if you hear a little bang, hear that bang? You say, well, where'd that come from? Well, somebody caused it. If you hear a bang behind me while I'm preaching, and I know I woke some of you up, if you hear a bang behind me, if there's a little bang, something caused the bang. In the Big Bang, the problem the scientists have, and they readily admit it, is that was the first event, but they don't know what the first cause was. Who or what caused it? Now, I mean, that's a huge question. So you're saying in this one moment in time, poof, everything that we see, the galaxies that are just floating through space, that the pictures we're getting, they're beautiful. You mean, well, who caused that? The Big Bang is consistent with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. One of the renowned astronomers is Dr. Robert Jastrow. He's an agnostic. Now, an atheist doesn't believe there's a God. An agnostic doesn't believe we can prove there is a God, or doesn't know that we can't know these things. Either way, he's not a believer in God. And here's what he said as we started to look at the Big Bang and we started to deal with this first cause. Quoting him, "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. He pulls himself over the final rock. He's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries, saying there was a starting point." Stephen Hawking, in his book, A Brief History of Time, quote, "It would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us," end quote, Stephen Hawking. So the Big Bang, I would ask a non-believer, explain that first cause. Yeah, that's the first event. What's the first cause? Here's a second question I would ask. How do you explain the exquisite tuning of the universe? They talk about the intelligent designer. I believe there is I call him God. And when you look at this our planet, They say our Earth is just right. It's like baby bear soup, not too hot, not too cold, just right. It's not too far from the sun, not too close to the sun. The moon is there. It gives us tides, which refresh our oceans. You have the tilt of the Earth, which is just right. We have our molten core that keeps us warm. We have this elliptical orbit. If it was circular, we'd be in trouble. If we were straight up, we would be in trouble. If it took longer to circle the sun, we'd be in trouble. If it didn't spin it would not. If you take any of these things away, if you didn't have Jupiter and Saturn, these massive planets, intercepting the asteroids, we'd be getting bombed with them all of the time. And it's like there was a creator, an intelligent designer, an engineer to end all engineers that said, here's how I'm going to set it up. Dr. Vera Kistiakowsky, professor of physics emerita at MIT and former president of the Association of Women in Science, summarized the implications of the evidence. She said, the exquisite order displayed by our scientific understanding of the physical world calls for the divine. Let me quote a former atheist, Dr. Patrick Glenn. He said, ironically, the picture of the universe bequeathed to us by the most advanced 20th century science is closer in spirit to the vision presented in the book of Genesis than anything offered by science since Copernicus. You know, you look at who designed it. Stonehenge. Remember Stonehenge? Let's see a picture of that. You look at it and say, how did it get there? Now, it would be one thing to say, well, is it possible by natural forces for that to happen? Sure. It could. It could. Everybody laughs and say, it's possible, but it's not very probable. Well, there must have been a designer. Well, here's another thing. When you look at possibility, I've got a coin here. And how many of you think if I flip this 50 times, I can get 50 heads in a row? All right? You say, is it possible? Sure. Want me to try? All right. This is not a fake coin. Silver dollar, Eisenhower. And the first one, I got tails. All right, let's try it again. I got to at least get one heads, another tails. So let's see if I can get 50 tails in a row, okay? I'm 2 there. Heads, I'm done. Now you say, Kevin, what is the probability? Yeah, show that whole, it doesn't even fit up there. I can't pronounce the number. It's possible, but it's not probable. And when we look at what we have out there, the numbers are so much greater than that we can't show it. So I'm not a preacher, but let me give you some other men of science. Harvard-educated astrophysicist Dr. John O'Keefe of NASA. Here's what he said. If the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could never have come into existence. It's my view that these circumstances indicate the universe was created for man to live in. How about a Nobel laureate, Dr. Arno Penzias? He said, astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the most delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan, end quote. Okay, so that's the universe. I could go on. I want to get personal for a while as we close. A third, I'm only going to give you 3 arguments. I'll give you 5 next week. Yeah, we'll get into evolution next week. Number 3, how do you account for the intelligent design within your own body? How do you account for that? You say, I didn't know I had intelligent design. All right, so how many cells do you have in your body? 100 trillion cells. Okay, that's a lot. That's 1,000 billion if I've got that right. Each one of your cells has something in common. It has a DNA. You say, the DNA, is that squiggly line-like thing? Yeah. You have 100,000 of those in your body. Okay? They are a little molecule inside of each cell. You say, how long are they? Well, if you were to stretch one of those out, and we can't, but if we did, each one of them would be 6 feet long. Stored in each one of those is more computing power than the most advanced supercomputers on Earth. You have 100 trillion of those in your body. Each one is able to make an exact duplicate of itself. They split. You've seen the thing where they just sort of split down the middle. Each one of those has billions of instructions regarding who you're going to be. Your DNA has not changed from the moment you were a one-cell creature and had one DNA. It is exactly the same as it was at the moment of conception. That's your DNA. If you compare it to a binary code, which has 2 different codes, your DNA has 4. It is so much more advanced. Bill Gates, who wrote some software, made this comment. He said, DNA is like a software program, only much more complex than anything we have ever devised. And he would be the first to tell you every software code has what? A designer. Who programmed your DNA? John Baumgartner said, the central issue, of course, is by what means the large coded language structure found in DNA arises. How did it get there? The simplest bacteria that you have in your body have genetic codes consisting of about 1 million 3-letter words constructed from a 4-letter genetic alphabet. He says, do coded language structures 1 million words long arise spontaneously by any known naturalistic process? Is there anything in the laws of physics that suggest how such a structure might appear in spontaneous fashion? Now, some of these are long quotes, and you're going to say, do you need to read them? Yeah, we need to hammer this home. To hear from another scientist, George Sim Johnson. He says, each human DNA contains more organized, each one of the 1 trillion, contains more organized information than the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. He said, if the full text of an Encyclopedia Britannica were to arrive in computer code from outer space, most people would regard this as proof of the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. But when seen in nature, we explain it as the working of random forces. Let me talk a geneticist, Dr. Michael Denton. The astonishing capability of microscopic DNA to harbor this mountain of information, carefully spelled out in a 4-letter chemical alphabet, quote, vastly exceeds that of any known system, end quote. Dr. Bernard Cooper, author of Information and the Origins of Life, said, we know that DNA is the repository for a digital code containing instructions for telling the cell's machinery how to build protein. He goes on and he says he recognizes that this was a critical hurdle in explaining how life began. Where did this genetic information come from? There was a designer. When we hear about intelligent design, that's what this is all about. And you have a group of scientists that are saying, you may not agree that there is a God, but you got to believe there's somebody that has designed this. Just your DNA shouts of it. Now, the Rosetta Stone. You've seen the Rosetta Stone. It's in the British Museum. It's in 3 languages. Nobody could ever break the code on Egyptian hieroglyphs until they found the Rosetta Stone, 100 and some years ago. And one of the other, it had the hieroglyphs, but it was written in 3 languages. One of them was Greek. And once we knew that, oh, here's the Greek, so this is what these symbols must be, we broke the code as far as the hieroglyphs in the pyramids and all over Egypt. And you say, did somebody make that Rosetta Stone? It unlocked the code. Yeah, of course there had to be an intelligent designer. Now, it's been said that what do you make of the fact that each of your 100 trillion DNA, this is personal now, stores far more information in a smaller space than the most advanced supercomputers on this planet? That's you. Oh, we are fearfully and wonderfully made by God, aren't we? That's why you started out as 1 cell with 1 strand of DNA. And every cell has this desire to reproduce itself. And that's why we believe at birth, life is sacred. And God's fingerprints are all over it. Now, the new discoveries, when the Hubble telescope said, my goodness, the universe is expanding. You say, did it discredit what we believe? No. With other stuff, for example, the genome, human genome, you hear that, and it's hard to understand this. So let me quote the head of the Genome Project. His name is Dr. Francis Collins. He is the head of the Human Genome Program. And he said this, your DNA was our instruction book, previously known only to God. And now we're starting to see how he did it. So I look at the genome. I look at the marvels of stem cells. Now, stem cells, there's controversy about whether or not you should use them from embryos. And I don't believe we should. But increasingly, they're finding that the most productive stem cells are the ones taken from people, not from embryos. And they're seeing that, my goodness, we take one little stem cell and we can get this stem cell to reproduce parts of your heart, that little stem cell with one DNA in there is able to do that. And as I look at where stem cell research is going, I can only marvel. Now, everything can be abused. We all understand that. But it can also be something that will be of great benefit for those that are quadriplegics, paraplegics. I just pray that this will be used for the right things. But it endorses the intelligent designer. What about blood clotting? You say, well, every time you prick your finger, your blood clots. If it didn't, what would happen? You'd bleed out. It'd be like puncturing a balloon, and everything would come out. Now, we got a guest staying with us, Nancy Behrens, and she's a nurse, and she's with ABWE, and she is helping to start a hospital in Togo, Africa, and was involved with a hospital in Bangladesh, and I was out there actually working with her. It felt good to have a nurse traveling with you, because there are all kinds of reasons to need a nurse in those areas. But she would tell you, blood clots, doesn't it? And I'd like to get her up here, and I'm not going to tell us, well, how do the clotting cells know to go to where the wound is? Because there are special blood clotting things in your body circulating through, and when there's a puncture, they all go to where the puncture is. Say, how do they know how to do that? Now, maybe other people are smarter than me, and they say, oh, well, here's how it works. But God has designed your body so amazingly. One of the newer sciences is quantum mechanics or quantum physics. Albert Einstein, he didn't believe that the universe was expanding until he was forced to admit that it was, but he also didn't believe in what was going in at a subatomic level, where not only is the universe immense beyond our ability to understand it, but every cell is made up of atoms, and every atom has a nucleus with electrons going around it at a distance proportionately that would be the size of our universe, and that there is matter and there is energy in there so powerful that if you split one of those atoms, you know what happens. Boom. And you say, so how small can you go? So you mean this is nothing more than energy and space? Yeah, that's what the science tell me. And so as we learn more and more about this, we marvel at God's creation. I would say, as I conclude this part, if I have a person that's telling me, look, put your Bible away, show me that at least there is evidence to at least consider option 2, that there is a God, I would say, let's start with the Big Bang. What caused it? Number 2, I would say, let's look at this universe and the complexities of it and how God designed us to be just right. Baby bear soup. Not too hot, not too cold. Just right. And then thirdly, I said, let's meddle in your DNA. And I could go on and on. The intelligent design that is hardwired into our system. Next week, I'm going to look at your consciousness. You know you have a consciousness. You may not be able to prove a lot of other things, but you know yourself. And that desire, as Pascal said, there is a God-sized vacuum in the heart of every person that only God can fill. And I would also like to shake the evolutionist and say, let's talk about some of the hurdles we have that Darwin mentioned, and entertain the fact that it would seem to appear that there is a creator that created us. By the way, that's what I believe, that there is a divine creator. I believe there will be an accounting after my life is over, that I'm a soul and I'm going to have to face God. And I do believe I need to be ready for that. And I believe Jesus was the Son of God sent to earth so that when I die, if I have trusted in Jesus as my Savior, I get to go to heaven for all eternity. And what I'm going to do is I'm really curious. And I don't know who the most curious person here is, but I'm going to go through this universe that God created, and I want to see what's out there. And you say, do we have enough time? We've got all eternity. You say, is there enough to explore? From what I can see, there's more than we could explore. But the greatest thing is I will be united with Jesus. I will be united with Jesus. Because the Bible said if you believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, you'll be saved. If you're here this morning and you've never taken that step, let me encourage you to see me or one of the other leaders of the church. We would like to show you how you can be certain that after you die, your soul will enjoy fellowship with God forever and ever. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Come on up, guys. Let's sing that song together. Father, I thank you for the majesty of your universe. We just take it for granted. We don't even look into the depths of it. And yet you had made it beyond our understanding. You've left clues everywhere. We see you in creation. We see you in the beauty of the day. And all of the blessings flow from you, and we thank you for them. Help us next week as we load up and prepare to talk to our congregation regarding evolution. Father, it's my understanding that so many of our young people just have really bought into evolution. We haven't given a credible defense for divine creation. And I pray, Father, that I can give a credible defense for the fact that you created all of this and it wasn't just random. We ask this in Jesus' name.